Hi, eighth graders. Happy New Year. And we've got some historical fiction coming at you this month in 2021. We're living history pretty much every day these days. So, this is a great collection of books to be considering. And as always, I hope that if you aren't already reading something terrific, and if something on today's book talk doesn't strike you, I encourage you to reach out to me, to Miss Kump. Take a look at that Destiny Discover Library catalog where we are changing that banner all the time and adding new books to the collection. We've got our book fair books up right now, but that's going to be changing probably in the next week or so. And depending on when you listen to this book talk, it might be a new collection of books. So take a look and let us know what we can help you find. We are here for you and want to help you find something good to read. Before I get into today's books, a reminder about Read Club coming up on Wednesday, February 10th. Even if you are not a Harry Potter fan or if you haven't read all the books and seen all the movies, we would love for you to join us. It's going to be on Wednesday, the 10th of February, and I'll be putting info out on Schoology with the Zoom link. We are trying to escape Hogwarts in 30 minutes or less, and we need your help. This should be a ton of fun, whether, again, you know a lot about the books or not. And even if you haven't joined us for a Read Club virtual experience before, please do send me any messages that if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer those for you. We hope you can join us. The first book I'm sharing today, of course, all of these are going to be historical fiction, so I won't be mentioning that. These would come all from that shelf in the library. If you were down in the library, that's where you'd go. You can be requesting any of them using our curbside service, and we'll just launch right in. The first book is called All the Broken Pieces by Anne Berg. This is a story about a kid named Matt who had been taken out of his home in Vietnam 2 years before the start of the story. There had been a lot of war going on in Vietnam, and so due to that and due to it not being very safe to stay there, he was airlifted out of there and left his family behind so that he could have a safe place to live. He's been living with an adopted family in the United States and is feeling fairly at home. He's made some adjustments to that, has a new mom and dad, and he calls them mom and dad. And as a result of that, he's starting to kind of feel safe. But of course, as anyone would feel, it is really difficult for him to continue to think about the fact that he has family members at home and he knows some of what's gone on with them, but he also has a lot of unresolved things and he worries about them, wonders about them. This whole story is told in verse. So it's written in that, free verse poetry style, flows along really nicely. Matt also has earned his way onto the baseball team. Loves doing that, loves playing ball, but a number of the kids aren't accepting him because he's Vietnamese. He doesn't look the same as a lot of the kids that are on the team, and so because he is different in that way, they aren't accepting of him. This is taking place at a time period when anybody who looks different is treated a little bit differently in that way, and he's trying to adjust to this new life with his new parents. He feels safe, but he's not yet feeling at home. All the Broken Pieces is a great book to pick up if you want to know some more about the Vietnam War and about those who escaped that violent situation and were trying to rebuild their lives. The second story is a terrific one for those that want a mix of history and mystery. And I think especially in today's pandemic world, this book is going to sit differently. You can see it's called The Great Trouble by Deborah Hopkinson. And the subtitle, A Mystery of London, the Blue Death, and a Boy Called Eel. And the Blue Death was cholera. It was called the Blue Death because of the blue lips that often were left behind as a result of people becoming ill. And we're going to watch a trailer that tells us a little bit more about Eel and his situation and what the Great Trouble exactly was. This book is just perfect for those of you that love the science and epidemiology behind pandemics. This story with Jon Snow that was mentioned here, a real life guy. You could research him, Google, find out a little bit more about what he believed to be true. People, as they said in this trailer, thought that cholera was coming from the air, and his belief was that it was being contracted through water instead. And so, due to that, in this story, through the work of this doctor as well as, or the scientist, and Eel, our main character, they're going to dig in and see if they can prove it's actually happening through the water and hopefully put a stop to it claiming all these lives. A great book for, unfortunately, this time of our lives right now, The Great Trouble. My Name is Not Easy by Debbie Dahl Edwardson. I've got a couple sentences there quoted right from the book where you can see kind of the inspiration for the name of this story, the title for this book. This book's about a kid whose name is Luke, but that's only his English given name. When he is moved from his Arctic village in Alaska, as you can see here, the setting for our story, he's pulled away from his home like hundreds and hundreds of other children. And instead of family at this new Sacred Heart school, boarding school, he's asked to live there. There are tons of students there. There's Eskimo children, Indian children, white children, and they're all being lined up there in the cafeteria. And this kid says it's like there's some kind of war going on, and they're being told they're not allowed to speak in their native languages. So even though Luke, his name isn't actually Luke, in his native language, it's as he says in this quote here, it's too hard for others to pronounce his name. And so they just call him Luke instead. And that's just the beginning of what's being taken away from these Native American children. In the story, Luke is struggling to survive at Sacred Heart School as his culture, his language, and so much of what he sees as his identity is being stripped away from him. Based on true stories about children being taken from their homes and put into these boarding schools hundreds of miles from their villages, this is set in Alaska. Again, separate stories about different kids, and it's a fictional story, but based in some historical, truth, like any historical fiction is. Read this book about Luke and about other students who have their own stories to tell and how their lives are upended and changed. Mapping the Bones is one of two World War II stories that I'm sharing with you. And of course, when it comes to historical fiction, there's never a lack of these kinds of stories. I'm sharing these two in particular because they are a little bit different than some of the others that are in our collection. This one, Mapping the Bones by Jane Yolen, you may have already read one of her other books, The Devil's Arithmetic, in elementary school or maybe in sixth grade. This book, Mapping the Bones, is definitely an eighth or ninth or 10th or maybe even senior high or into college type read. Not necessarily because of reading level, but because of the content. It is a hard read. Um, it's a serious book, and it's a tough one to get through. And I'm not just saying that, as thinking about you guys as eighth graders. I'm saying that as an adult in reading the book. It's set in 1942. We've got two kids, and I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly, Kiem and Gittel. They're both from Poland, and they're fraternal twins, a boy and a girl. They're forced out of their home, and they are made to live in the ghetto in Lodz, Poland. And when this is happening, of course, this is the time of Adolf Hitler. It's the time of the concentration camps and all that. So they're taken from their home. They're put into this ghetto, which is a neighborhood that's, you know, uh, not well taken care of. It's blocked off. It's meant to restrict, and they're in really cramped quarters. It's awful. Their parents decide things are getting too dangerous there, and they, along with lots of others, decide they're going to basically make a break for it. They're going to try to get away as Jews themselves and find freedom in Russia. When they do, however, their parents' lives are put into danger, and the twins are able to escape. Their parents are not. Now, I'm not giving too much away because I promise this happens pretty dang early in the story. That's really where it all begins. From here, the story gets even more intense as these twins now are not just heading, not living in the ghetto any longer. Now you experience their lives moving through concentration camps, disease. You see these two trying, even as they're bonded as twins, trying to make their way through. Plus, as some of you might know from the history of World War II and these concentration camps, twins in particular were of interest to some in that they were experimented upon. And that's going to be true for Kiem and Gittel in this book. So again, this book is definitely a more advanced, serious read. If you've already read a lot about this time period, this is going to be a more harrowing tale, but certainly a very well-written, very well-researched book. It was one that once I read it, I wanted to then Google and dive in and read more about the Lodz Ghetto, about some of the people that are mentioned in this book, some of the real-life people. And anyway, it's one that you may wish to pick up. The other World War II book that I'm bringing up is fairly new to our library, by Monica Hesse. She's the same author as Girl in the Blue Coat, if you've read that one. And she's going to do a nice job in this video here of explaining how her book is a little different than a lot of other World War II books you may have read. So I'm actually going to let her tell you about this one.
Hey Barnes & Noble readers, I'm Monica Hesse, author of They Went Left, which is Barnes & Noble's selection for its May YA book club. This is my third novel set during World War II, and I realized something during my years of research that most of what I read always ended at the same place, with the end of the war. And I was really curious about that time period after. What does it look like when your country has been torn apart and you now have to figure out how to sew it back together again? So They Went Left follows the journey of Sophia Lederman, a young Holocaust survivor who's now searching for her brother Abek, who she believes is the only other living member of her family. It takes her on a journey across Poland and Germany. She meets people who are in the same situation that she is. She discovers friendship and family. And what I like about this story is that it's a story about healing and hopefulness. It's a story about coming through impossible circumstances and finding family and finding new definitions of family and new definitions of love. It's also a mystery, and there are some twists and turns that I hope you don't see along the way. It's really meaningful to me to be part of Barnes & Noble's book club, especially now, especially virtually. We're having so many conversations about social isolation and how we all have to be apart. But I think that books are one of the few remaining ways that we can all be together. We can all be together in one room, even when we're in our own rooms across the country.
So I hope that that encourages you. Again, if you've read a lot of books about this time period, this topic, I really liked what she said about she was curious as a writer. What happens to some of these characters after after the Holocaust was over, after World War II was over? She wanted to see, and so she wrote a book to kind of find out. The last book I'm sharing with you is In the Shadow of Blackbirds by Kat Winters. As you can see, it's set in San Diego, California, about 100 years ago, 1918, the time of the Spanish flu pandemic. And yes, indeed, I did put a picture of someone wearing a mask because in this book, so many of the characters are doing exactly what we've been doing for months. Americans are roaming the streets wearing masks, and they're doing it because they're trying to ward off the Spanish flu. This is not the first time that our country has been going through a pandemic. 100 years ago, people were doing the exact same thing. And as a result, this book was set in that time period. We've got a 16-year-old here by the name of Mary, and she is watching a lot of people doing some kind of unusual things in this book. She watches mourners, right, as people are losing folks to this flu. She's watching people go to these seances to try to meet meet up with the ghosts, the spirits of those that they've lost. They're also going to spirit photographers for comfort. So they're trying to actually capture on film pictures of their loved ones who have passed away. Kind of an interesting idea. She herself, though, Mary, has never believed in ghosts until she has fallen in love. And this part of the story is a romance. She falls for this guy, and it's kind of part spiritual ghost story, part romance, part flu pandemic. And you learn about the Spanish flu and how people were responding to that pandemic 100 years ago. I couldn't help but throw this one in because of what we're going through today. And I think you'll find this one to be kind of a delightful read in watching Mary fall for this guy in the midst of everything. So I hope that one of the books I shared today, and we have an awesome historical fiction collection, by the way. This is a handful of some of what we've got. If there's a certain time period, event, person that you want to know more about, please reach out. If you want to know about a true life person, if you want to reach out and find out about a biography or a memoir or something like that, we have such an awesome nonfiction section. And you can obviously, of course, search the catalog, but also let me know. I am here to help, and I would love to have a conversation with you about some great books and get you some resources. Hope that everyone is doing well, and I certainly miss seeing you, but love the conversations that we get to have about books and reading in the meantime. If I can do anything else for you, let me know. Otherwise, happy reading.